of Mizoram University, esteemed participants throughout India and outside. Today, we are having this webinar on behalf of Mizoram University on the topic Good Governance, Challenges and Initiatives. Now, I would like to request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.A. Sambasiva Rao, to speak a few words of welcome on behalf of Mizoram University. Now, it's over to our
Good afternoon, sir. Srinivas, sir.
Sir.
This is Sambasiva Rao, Vice Chancellor, Mizoram University. We welcome you and we thank you very much. And when I'm sending the poster yesterday to many people, some of them, they were mentioning that he is a very good speaker and I know him. And some, they joined also today's program. And one Institute Corporate Governance in Delhi, one librarian is there, she is telling Lata Suresh, she joined in the meeting also. She was telling me that I know him, sir, he is a very good speaker. So that's why I'm just mentioning that you have a very good name in Delhi and other places, because I sent more than 2,000 people yesterday the circular today's program. So it's a very nice of you, sir, and it's a very good gesture on you for gracing this occasion and giving a lecture on good governance. It is a very pertinent topic for the present day system. I'm also very much interested to listen, and thank you very much, sir. And Professor Patnaik is also here. Let Patnaik also can speak, say one.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor, sir. Thank you, Professor Pathi. I'm really happy that Professor Pathi is organizing one wonderful webinar on good governance. And Professor Pathi is aware of my area of interest in that field. And we have also written a book also on that, of course, a compilation of articles on good governance. And Professor Pathi has also contributed to that book. I will not talk much about the thing, but given the present situation, the COVID pandemic situation, the way the state is faced with the tough challenge in terms of governance and in terms of delivering the goods for the well-being of the people, we would expect the speaker to deal these aspects, particularly pertaining to this COVID-19. Theoretically, good governance, we know that how it has originated since the ages, days of Plato and so on. But in the present context, in the 21st century, and particularly this because of COVID, the notion of governance has undergone, and the state structure has become much more assertive, which is of course need of the hour. But at the same time, how the civil society gets space in the larger framework of this state structure, so as to have a kind of compromise and a kind of balance between civil society and the state. That is also equally important, and that aspect also I expect the honorable speaker to deal with. Anyway, I will stop over here because I don't want to prolong my discussion. And thanks a lot for giving me a chance to speak. Thank you, Professor Pathi.
Okay. I thank Honorable Vice Chancellor sir and our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor sir. Now, it's a privilege to know about our present speaker. He has a long CV, but still I would request my co-panel, Dr. Babuji, to speak a few words about today's guest speaker, Mr. V.SRINIVAS. Babu.
Thank you, sir. A very good afternoon to you all in the virtual presence of the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.S. Sambasiva Rao, Pro VC J.K. Patnaik, sir, and the co-panelists, Professor Srinivas, sir. I deem it as a privilege and also enthused to introduce our speaker of the day, V.SRINIVAS, IAS. Sir hails from the state of Telangana. He obtained his bachelor's and master's degree in chemical engineering from College of Technology, Osmania University. Immediately after the completion of his master's, He went on to pursue his career in coveted Indian civil services at very young age in 1989 from Rajasthan cadre. Thereafter, he went on to hold umpteen number of positions both in the Rajasthan government as well as in the government of India. Let me cite some of the key positions that Sir held in his 32 years of long and distinguished career. He started his career as a district collector of Jodhpur and Pali. He served as a deputy director of AIMS administration, Director General of Archives of India, Joint Secretary to Government of India in the Ministry of Textiles, Joint Secretary to the Government of India in the Ministry of Culture, Secretary to the Government of Finance and Planning Department, Rajasthan, Advisor to the India's Executive Director in the Monetary Fund, Private Secretary to the Finance Minister of India and Private Secretary to the External Affairs Minister, Chairman of the Board of Revenue and Board of Tax. At present, Sir is serving as an Additional Secretary to the Government of India in the Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions with additional charge of Director General, National Center for Good Governance from December 2018 onwards. Apart from these key positions and distinguished service to the nation, Sir's state taste in academics is no less. He secured Indian Council of World Affairs Fellowship for 2017 and 18 for his book, India's Relations with the International Monetary Fund, 25 years in perspective, and has authored his second book, Towards New India, Good Governance Transformed 2014 and 19, which was published in 2019. On the top of it, he has authored 154 articles and research papers on public finance and public administration, and in the same line, he has delivered 56 speeches in diverse platforms. Hence, he is a blend of distinguished public service, foresighted policymaker, a nation builder, prolific academician, and an impressive motivator, to which he has been credited with several awards both by government and the civil society. He was featured as civil servant for the year 2017 by International News and Views. He was featured as administrator for the months of May-June 2017 by magazine Smart Governance. He was felicitated by the CM of Rajasthan for outstanding public service. He was conferred AIMS Leadership Excellence Award. Well, there is no end to the awards conferred upon him for his excellent service and other vital endeavors. Sir, we cherish your public service, interest in academics, and noble credentials. With this brief introduction of the distinguished speaker, let me hand over the session to Professor Patil sir for further proceedings of the webinar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Babuji. Now, Dr. Babu can go on and on, but I think we have limited time. Let's wait for some other day when we can have Mr. V.SRINIVAS among us so that we can have more talk. So, without wasting time, just one word for the participants, then I will hand over to Mr. V.SRINIVAS, our honorable guest speaker. Dear participants, we are beholden, we are simply so much facilitated by your presence that so many registrations and still it continues. Please write your questions, relevant questions in the Q&A section. We will pick up a few and others we may try to respond in some other time. And the topic of today's webinar is Good Governance in India, Challenges and Initiatives. You know, one of the persons who wrote to me in email, he wrote, governance must be good. So what is good in good governance? The idea is reinforcing the goodness in governance is good governance. With these few words, it's a privilege to hand over the session to Mr. V.SRINIVAS, Director General, National Center for Good Governance, Government of India, New Delhi. Now session yours. Kindly start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished Professor KRS Samsarao Garu, the Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, the Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor J.K. Patnaik, my distinguished friend and Professor and Head of Department of Public Administration, Professor V.SRINIVAS Patiji, Dr. Babu. Thank you for the introduction. I'm fascinated to be amidst you today. I did have the opportunity to interact with Professor Srinivas Pati a few weeks ago, and I somehow greatly enjoyed my interactions with him as a very learned individual in the field of public administration. And having been an administrator from the age of 22 till now, and having studied public administration for my civil service, I could recognize an intellectual who has contributed immensely to this field of public administration. So it's a great privilege for me to speak with you and interact with the students of your university. I have a presentation that I have prepared for you and what I seek to share with you today. And permit me to make the presentation, then we can continue the discussion. So,
please continue. Yeah, with the presentation.
Yes. I hope you can see the PowerPoint. Can you see the PowerPoint? Yes.
Yeah, we can see.
The title of the talk today is Good Governance in India, Challenges and Initiatives. And the objective of the lecture is to inspire the students of Mizoram University for a career in civil service. This is all I have done ever since I joined the service. It's now 32 years. I came in quite young, and I'd be happy to share with you the sheer joy that one gets out of serving millions of Indians and how best the theory of public administration can be translated into action when you implement and pursue a career in governance. I have been introduced as an author. Yes, I have written 2 books. The first one as an ICWA fellow, and it's a very heavily theoretical and academic work. It's called India's Relations with the International Monetary Fund, 25 years in perspective, 91 to 2016. It has about 1,100 references and more than 44 interviews, and based upon my years in serving in Washington, D.C. on the board of the International Monetary Fund representing India. And yesterday I was at IIM Bangalore addressing an audience on this subject of India's relations with the IMF. The second book that I have authored is Towards a New India, Governance Transformed, and 2014 to 19, as to how the governance paradigm has changed in the last 6 years and where we see governance challenges going. And as Professor Patnaik has said, I would delve in my lecture with regard to the COVID pandemic challenges also. I've had a long career in civil service, but these 2 moments do stand out especially for me. One, when the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India launched my first book, India's Relations with the IMF, and it took me a huge amount of effort and work to make it happen. Meetings with several governors of the central banks of India, and also with all the chief economic advisors, finance secretaries, all the executive directors of India to the IMF. It's a very substantive academic research work. The second one, which I've written based on my own experience of traveling more than 8,000 kilometers in Rajasthan as chairman, board of revenue, covering 33 districts and meeting more than 60,000 people, was what the changes that I had observed in the rural countryside of Rajasthan was what I had documented. As I said, this lecture is about governance, and let me tell you, the civil servant in me, particularly since it's being organized by the Department of Public Administration, which is mandated to create administrators and which is mandated to promote research in the fields of hierarchy, the span of control, management practices. In fact, a lot of colleagues have said there's been a McDonaldization of the civil service, and that all of you look the same. You buy a McDonald's French fries, either you buy it in Delhi or you buy it in Washington or London, all of them look the same. There is very little difference. That's not so. There are a huge number of differences in the way individuals approach the governance model. And I will share with you my own governance model. And I had a post-graduation in chemical engineering, and then I was introduced to the subject of public administration by Professor Hargopal and Professor Srinivasan from the Hyderabad University. I did not know public administration was a subject in which I had so much flair. And I realized that when I gave the civil service examination in 1988, I topped the examination by the end of it, and I realized that I had a flair for governance and public administration. And I joined the service at 22, and the civil service examination represented, and it remains today, one of the most competitive examinations in the world. It's an aspirational goal for millions of Indians. More than 15 lakh Indians appear for this examination on an annual basis. And my own experience is that the Indian Administrative Service exposes an official to rural India as also urban India like no other service does. In fact, when I went from Hyderabad to Rajasthan, my first posting was at Nagaur, and it was in the middle of the Thar Desert. Temperatures would be 50 degrees plus in summers, and sand dunes would be raging. There would not be electricity, brackish water, and it was a different diet. One had to eat bajra ki roti vis-a-vis eating rice. It was a very difficult transition in the initial years. But then the IAS teaches you resilience, and I found that as years went on, the Indian Administrative Service exposed me not only to rural India, but also to urban India like no other service does. And that is what I want to reinforce to the participants in this seminar today. The service comes with certain foundational values. And this was a line that Dr. Duvar Subbarao told me. I asked him, how do you think the challenges of 21st century differ from the challenges that the civil servants faced in the 20th century? He said, Srinivas, there is no difference. The commitment to larger public good against all odds. The commitment to larger public good against all odds is what defines the Indian Administrative Service, and that remains the greatest foundational value that the service can have. Integrity, building credibility and trust in the institution of civil service. I was quite amazed to see, even as I went as a young officer to fields and to villages, numerous villages where I did night halts, to Tehsil headquarters, I found the tremendous trust that Indians reposed in the Indian Administrative Service. They looked to it with impartiality, for fairness and justice. And leadership and faith in fairness and impartiality, these I realized very early on, these could not be outsourced. And it had a very high moral overtone. In that I always believed I am ethical, I am accountable, I am the IAS. When I joined the IAS, my father gave me one mantra. He said, never fudge a TA bill, never fudge a logbook. And that has remained with me after 32 years too. I am ethical, I am accountable, and I am the IAS. I will never ensure any of these basic paradigms are violated. There is a contemporary framework. Let me put the contemporary framework that Professor Pati must be teaching his students. One is fiscal federalism. States have become stronger. I used to see states with Mr. Shekhawat as Deputy Secretary Finance. We used to fight for something like 29% to 30% devolution from the central shares. Today we have 42% devolution. The rise of the state governments in the federal setup is one great feature of our Indian democracy. The second is affordable healthcare. We've had Panchayat Samiti level PHCs coming up with 30-bed hospitals. The community health centers coming up with almost 100-bed hospitals. District hospitals being upgraded into medical colleges. Affordable healthcare has been a key feature of governance across the years. Rural India has been transformed. In fact, I was struck how much. I had visited the village Dhandada in Jodhpur district in 1999 as a district collector. I went back to the same village in 2018 as Chairman Board of Revenue, and I found that the village had transformed completely. One could find digital merchants, one could find e-mitras, one could find common service centers there. The quantum of change and the manner in which rural societies had adapted to change is something that had always struck me, and that is a feature of contemporary governance. Social inclusion, there's been a huge change in terms of our inclusive policies, in terms of reservation policies, as also in terms of economically weaker sections, other backward castes. There's been a massive change in terms of social inclusion. We also now have the entire campaign for enabling the disabled persons, and also a separate department of Divyangjan which looks at disabilities. And improving service delivery, everybody is looking at improved service delivery. We would like online deliveries to happen. You have Amazon.com that's there, but there are also several state portals which are providing you a huge amount of service delivery. The next concept is doorstep delivery. In Delhi, several districts have started practicing doorstep deliveries. The fifth one is Atmanirbhar Bharat, and that is a concept that is being currently discussed with regard to the handling of the pandemic, and I'll come to it in my later slides. How does the civil service look in 2020? If there is an aspiring student of Mizoram University, you can be sure that the recruitment is highly competitive. Training norms are extremely stringent. Yesterday, we had one of the big training reforms that has been circulated for those of us who have joined service. But training norms remain highly stringent. There are constant evaluations that have been introduced on the capacity of civil servants to meet current challenges. Effective management of public resources through open, transparent, and accountable systems of delivery has become important. And what we can see is the accountability to the Controller and Auditor General, to the Central Vigilance Commission, to the Central Bureau of Investigation, and now our most recent institution of the Lokpal has increased. Never before were civil servants so accountable as what they are today. How do I see good governance 2020? Now, good governance template that we see today is one nation, one constitution has become a reality. We've had the 150th year of celebrations of the Mahatma, in which tributes were paid. There have been a lot of steps taken for improving farmers' income and security with regard to the insurance schemes that have been introduced, also the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Yojana that is operational. There have been sweeping reforms introduced in foreign direct investment policies for India to reach a $5 trillion economy. Also, national security has become a big issue. Surakshit Bharat, Saksham Bharat has become a big buzzword. Social empowerment has driven India, and we're empowering more and more our weaker sections, our reserved categories, the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, being greatly empowered over a period of time. And improving the quality of life is something that has been an essential focus. So many services which are not available now, we talk of water supply being delivered at every doorstep, housing for all, drinking water for all, roads to every village. These are the major changes. And Indian infrastructure is being taken to a global level. And also, post-Ayodhya verdict, we've seen peace and harmony prevail across the country. The big buzzword is India at 75, and India at 75, we see that development becomes a people's movement, and successful implementation of priority programs, be it in health sector, be it in women and child development, be it in with regard to the construction of rural roads, these have become priority programs, and to bring together innovation, technology, enterprise, and efficient management. And of course, the fair and clean administration has been the bulwark of the entire process. There are three new critical institutions that have come up. One is the Lokpal, which is something new. We didn't have it before. And the second is the GST Council, which is a real body of federalism between the center and states. And then the Niti Aayog, which has replaced the Planning Commission as a new institution for innovation and ideas. Now, when I see the digital transformation of India's governance, we see 1.2 billion Aadhaar cards. Everybody has an Aadhaar card. And we have had a billion e-transactions since the launch of Digital India. Several lakhs of common service centers have been created. The number of government services that are available online have gone to more than 450. And more than 31 lakh Jan Dhan bank accounts have been created. I remember visiting several villages across districts. I found everybody had a bank account. Construction of toilets now has reached 100% coverage. And the All India Institute of Medical Sciences recently did a study, and they found that those villages which had safe toilets and were using toilets were the ones where the chronic disease prevalence has come down a great deal. And there's been a tremendous benefit that has come about by this program of Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin, definitely. In fact, I remember reading about Wulimur Ramalingaswamy when he did his research in Himachal Pradesh on using iodine to salt. And that was how the national goiter program was developed, because salt was added to iodine. And today we find that every salt that we buy has iodine added to it. So Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin has brought in tremendous behavioral change in the way people see themselves. Then we also have the second largest digital consumer base, and the benefits of technology have been accepted by the rural people. It's also an inclusive model of governance, particularly the internet model of governance. There are internet rich people and there are internet poor people. And this $1 trillion digital opportunity seeks to reduce the digital divide. It seeks to expand our internet access and provide high-speed internet connectivity across the country. And technology-enabled interventions today are seen in healthcare. The Prime Minister has announced the National Digital Health Mission. My mind goes back to the Digital AIMS project that we did in 2015, wherein which we introduced unique health identification cards to every patient, and also online registration for OPD services. Education, it is being witnessed every day through the Swayam program. Many of you are taking online classes today. My own children undergo online classes every day for several hours. Energy, the next gen financial services. In terms of e-governance, that's what we see in the Secretariat. We work long hours working online, like this webinar taking place, and doubling of farmers' income. These are the areas where the technology-enabled interventions are being largely seen. Further, technology is seen in many of our welfare state programs. In fact, most programs are seated in Aadhaar, and also the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana has enabled a huge amount of fiscal transfers in the time of the pandemic. Direct benefit transfers is what we see. Digital payments using UPI and BHIM. The Goods and Services Tax Network has enlarged the taxpayer base. We also had this old program of land records modernization, which is now part of the Digital India program. And then One Nation, One Ration Card, fair price shops going online with using of Aadhaar identification, then LPG subsidies going online, and labor payments to NREGA being directly deposited through postal banks. These are what we see. Now let me turn to governance in a pandemic, and how has the pandemic changed India's governance? Now, India's response to the COVID-19 pandemic has become a people's movement. We've rendered medical assistance to over 150 countries in the true norm of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We also helped create a SARC COVID emergency fund. An economic package of more than 300 billion has been announced, that's 20 lakh crores. And this is where the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or a self-reliant and resilient India, has been announced. And food security is being provided to crores of citizens. Also, direct benefits transfers to several crores have happened. Now, the message of the government and the Prime Minister has been that teamwork, compassion, and statesmanship must define governance. And it was in this period when I saw a huge number of young officers putting in really long hours to handle the challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic has posed. The road ahead should focus on Do Gaz Duri, he said. Arogya Setu app has been accepted by crores of Indians and open up the economic activities. Let me share with you my own experiences of governance in the COVID-19 pandemic. We handled the public grievance redressal systems in government, and we received a huge number of complaints or grievances, that's pain points of citizens. We created what was called a COVID-19 dashboard, in which various types of grievances could come in, and citizens could write directly to the Prime Minister or to the department. And this was some of the grievances that were received in phase 1 of the lockdown. And we found we got about 80,000 grievances, and we could dispose them off pretty quickly because the system was highly geared up to dispose them. And these are the states that received the grievances. These are the central ministries that received the grievances. And this was how the breakup of the states that came in. The large category of grievances related to hospital infrastructure, supply-related issues, migrant labor, civil aviation, where a lot of evacuation requests were coming in, school and higher education issues. Students were not clear when their exams would be held, when schools would reopen. Then we had salary issues, employee-related issues, which kept coming in, and people were not clear how their salaries would pay out. Then banking issues, because a lot of people wanted their loans to be restructured, banks were closed, loan repayments were not very clear. And there were also Indians who were stranded in several countries who wanted to come back to India. When you see the breakup of how the grievances looked, we found that health-related grievances took about third place. In fact, the biggest were the salary-related and employee-related issues. There were also the evacuation issues that took precedence over the health issues in the initial stages. We also contacted more than 410 district collectors as we formulated what was called the COVID-19 preparedness survey, which highlighted the strengths and gaps in our infrastructure, which were later addressed rapidly in our response system. So the first step taken was to augment healthcare. So an emergency financial package was offered to healthcare for strengthening the PPEs, then also with regard to isolation wards and ICU beds and creation of new COVID laboratories. COVID testing had to be increased. It was a virus which we were not very familiar with, and India had to ramp up its hand sanitizers, production of personal protection equipment, N95 masks, as also Swadeshi swab sticks had to be created. A separate fund was created for this purpose to deal with the disaster for PM CARES, money of which was used for augmenting supply of ventilators and vaccine development. Then we had the Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign, which was launched, which envisaged relief to the poor and migrants, job creation with enhanced allocations to NREGA, MSME loan restructurings, liquidity injection to power discoms, as also support to state government, and exemption for COVID imports was provided. Then evacuation of migrant labor, Shramik trains were operated, and several millions of people that could be transported home. And in terms of international collaboration, we allowed the export of hydroxychloroquine to United States and Brazil, and paracetamol to over 100 countries. And SARC members held a video conference. We found the Prime Minister interacting with heads of government of SARC, as also with G20 and non-aligned movement, which enabled a global policy making. In terms of children's education, there was a lot of focus, and an alternate academic calendar was to be prepared. It was an unprecedented change for children. They had to sit at home and study, and the promotion policy was on the basis of internal assessments. The syllabus was brought down, and online education was promoted. And online education is not the same as distance education. It was something totally different, and I found children initially struggling with this mode of education, sitting before a computer screen for almost 7 to 8 hours. A lot of awareness generation was created through Doordarshan, All India Radio, a PIB fact check to prevent the use of social media so that fake news should not be spread, and dedicated frequencies on community radio were allocated. One of the big challenges was to bring Indians who were stranded abroad home, and more than 40,000 Indians in the first phase were evacuated after Vande Bharat was launched. Today, it is over 150,000 Indians have come back. There were also a lot of foreign nationals who were stranded in India who wanted to go back, and we sent back foreign nationals to about 72 countries. The armed forces played a huge role in terms of evacuation of Indians stranded abroad. We had Operation Samudra Setu, where the naval ship Jalashwa brought back Indians from Maldives, and also medicines were supplied to several island nations of Maldives, Mauritius, Seychelles, and Madagascar. Now let me come to the issues. Well, how does contemporary governance challenges look like? The big challenge is it is survival of the most adaptable. Large work from home experiments are going on across the world, and supply chains have been disrupted, and we need to create a domestic supply chain. Telemedicine there's been a phenomenal rise with virtual consultation to doctors. OPD services have been suspended. Social distancing has become a way of life. and a contactless delivery has emerged. So you find that many of the e-commerce institute companies are doing very well. Governance itself has been redefined. We are at a less contact governance. Those of us who worked initially, Delhi witnessed huge number of cases. We had to work in masks and gloves. We worked from home, 25 to 33% coming to office. And there were short, medium, and long-term challenges as India got on to live with the coronavirus. Now, cooperative federalism has become very important. We had the rise of institutions. NITI has become extremely important. Similarly, ICMR, ERPG, railways, posts, Air India, strong institutions are a big step for the governance reforms. Cooperative federalism came to the forefront. There were huge numbers of meetings between the Prime Minister and Chief Ministers. Re-emergence of centrally sponsored schemes came forward. And there was also regulatory governance that came to the fore. The second big change that we saw was that virtual offices had become a reality, and web room meetings, new protocols needed to be designed. Like initially people would come shabbily dressed, come in t-shirts for web room meetings. Protocols were required to improve it. And a digital central secretariat was created with virtual private networks, home working policies, network safety was introduced. And how did the citizens see it? The citizens needed digital infrastructure, became a core utility. Government had to provide services on demand, and digital empowerment of citizens became very vital. It was the state secretariats where this battle against coronavirus was fought. So war rooms in state secretariats became important. There was massive coordination with field formations, and advanced office systems had to be developed across the state secretariats. And then we had this institution of district collector. And I was amazed to see how resiliently young officers stood up as district collectors to lead the fight against the coronavirus. They would work really long hours, providing essential services to the grassroots level. District departments were working in multiple shifts. Long curfew periods or lockdown periods were enforced. Social distancing, sealing of borders, village level task forces were implemented. It became a huge exercise. And initially, the short-term issues that we saw with regard to migrant labor, food distribution, essential commodities, management of infections, these have given place to the more medium-term issues of medical infrastructure, containment of spread, and also containment areas being better defined. And now we're looking at the long-term issues of restarting the economy, keeping the long-term growth story intact. And the thrust is for stronger institutions, stronger e-governance models, digitally empowered citizens, and improved healthcare. So this is the presentation that I had for you today, and I hope you enjoyed it. I would be happy to take questions, and let me give the floor back to Professor Pati, once again thanking him for this opportunity to address such a large gathering. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I wish we could continue on and on. We just listened to a nice chronicle of events from past to the present, spanning to the future regarding good governance in India, challenges and initiatives. We could not think of something better than today, but I wish we could give you much more time. So, Mr. Srinivas, thanks a lot, but still few queries are there. So I'll pick and choose a few, given the limited time at our disposal. So can I take a few now?
Yes, please go ahead. I'll be happy to answer.
Okay. So in the light of your discussion, there is one query which says that this new public administration, new public management paradigm, privatization is a key factor, key issue. So how can we relate good governance to privatization? Please.
When I joined service, we didn't have too much of a private sector. The commanding heights of the economy were all controlled by government. And we found almost 100% monopoly in, say, oil refining, in terms of manufacturing, in heavy industry, or even in light industry. It was virtually 100% monopoly. And that did not yield too much result. We found that, for example, I used to administer the oil pool account in the Ministry of Petroleum way back in 2000. And the oil pool was perpetually in losses because we found that in terms of settling accounts, the purchases by the oil marketing companies to the refining companies to the manufacturing companies were very slow because the marketing companies were not able to raise prices, and they were badly in need of government subsidies. We found that the public sector experience has been one where many public sector companies were showing losses, and a stage was reached where privatization was necessary to bring in additional investments, capital formation, expansion in terms of our own infrastructure. Population was growing and the public sector was simply not in a position to invest that kind of resources that India was requiring, given that it was facing chronic losses. And so the several public sector companies, the National Textiles Corporation, the NTC was one of the big corporations that went into privatization mode, and it emanated as part of the 1991 reforms package that we will have a BIFR, a Board for Industrial and Financial Restructuring, which will identify public sector companies which cannot be restructured, and those companies should be sold off. And thereafter, we've had a series of PSU sales. One of the big ones was my first company, which I joined immediately after chemical engineering. The Indian Petrochemicals Corporation Limited was sold off. And also then Hindustan Zinc is one big company in Rajasthan that was sold off. So, and today we notice that they've turned as profitable ventures. So in many ways, privatization is necessary to bring in additional capital formation, additional investments. For example, oil exploration was totally in government hands. And beyond Bombay High, the ONGC found investments, large-scale investments, difficult. So it needed to be diversified so that several international participants could come in and participate in oil exploration in India. So it is part of the current policy mix to ensure that privatization, it's now a mixed economy that we see.
Okay, thank you. There is one more issue. We are in a northeastern region of the country. It is called by India Tourism Development Corporation, the Paradise Unexplored. There is one question from one of the participants from this region. Some of the people of this region, they feel alienated in terms of governance. So how can good governance bridge this gap? It can allay the fears relating to alienation of northeastern states and the people, because they are equal participants in the country's progress and good governance paradigm. So what is your view that what we can do to make these people join the Indian development scenario so that this perceived sense of alienation can go, and how good governance can contribute to this particular aspect? Please.
It's a very important question, and government has a Department of Northeastern Development that is currently operational. I remember visiting Shillong last year 3 times, and we did the 22nd National Conference on e-governance. We also recently did a workshop for Northeastern states on promotion of e-office, in which all the chief ministers participated. My understanding of how greater governance models or improved governance models could be brought about is greater interaction. I see very dynamic officers in Northeastern cadres who are working. In fact, I recall the Chief Minister of Meghalaya works exclusively on e-office, disposes files on mobile phones, and there was a high energy about him when I interacted with him. And I found that colleagues were willing to really work long hours. And I've interacted with several colleagues, Imphal East Collector, Dr. Kini Singh, and she was telling me about the innovations that she has introduced. Bleeding with Pride, or Bleed with Pride is what she called when she introduced this sanitary napkins program across the entire district of Imphal East. Then East Garo Hills, Swapnil Tembe was interacting with me the other day and telling me how he had handled the pandemic. Then we had Kirti Jalli, who is the former collector of Hailakandi, who was interacting and telling me that tremendous energy that went into bringing the governance models into the northeastern region. I'm sure greater interaction, greater participation is the roadmap forward. And of course, technology empowerment, that is the key to every empowered citizen being created.
Thank you. As a supplement, I can just add to your list of good governance models. In one of the districts of Mizoram, one young IAS officer, he has seen to it that in 2 years, the chili farmers get 14 times more price for their product without middlemen. So, okay. The next question is, can there be some measurement of good governance in India? Can you measure good governance in terms of quantity, quality, dimensions? Can it be possible in present day scenario?
Yes, good governance can be measured. In fact, I authored the first good governance index. It's available on our website. I'll request participants to take a look at www.darpg.gov.in and just go to the good governance index. And you'll find a detailed publication on how states are measured in terms of the governance paradigms. And we do find northeastern states are featuring very highly on the governance model. In fact, I was greatly fascinated by the governance models of Northeast.
Okay, now the question is, while talking about good governance today, you started with the origin, then you talked about national, international, then coming back to rural. One query is about rural model, rural level of good governance. What should we do in India to enhance the rural level of good governance so that the bulk of Indian people who live in rural society, and you rightly talked about Mahatma Gandhi, who told India lives in our villages. So we want self-sustained village republics in India. So what can we do to enhance the rural level of good governance in India today, please?
Yes, it's a very interesting question and an extremely important one. I myself grew up in a village, and I remember my father was posted in Araku Valley, which is a tribal village of less than 250 people. And I used to go to a panchayat school and study. And from there, I think it's just the dint of hard work by the time I reached to actually serve on an IMF board in Washington, D.C. from Araku Valley was a huge career-changing transformation. And it came through dint of hard work. And it was possible because the village schools had a strong teaching platform, regular schooling was there. Also, in terms of today, when you see the villages, the size of village has grown. I indicated the example of Dhundada. I can go and point out several other villages wherein which the size of population has grown from 500 people to something like 10,000 people. And more technology has been adopted. The second one that I said was that everybody has a bank account. Everybody has a bank account, everybody has a road access, and everybody has a television access. And I think these are the big things to creating digitally empowered citizens. And the transformation that I see in villages, Rajasthan, when I went back in 2018, there was no power cuts in villages. And I recall in 1989, we used to have 3 days without power in the district level. So you really had to drink brackish water and stay without electricity in a district headquarters like Nagaur. But by 2020, we have every village being fully electrified.
Okay. So now the most problematic query from one of the participants. So I hope you would like to respond to it. What is the link or equation between level of corruption and level of good governance in India? Please.
Yes, there cannot be good governance with corruption. And India has a zero tolerance for corruption. The institutions, as I said, the accountability levels of the civil servant today are far higher than they were ever in the past. A Lokpal has been established. There are monitoring agencies like the Central Vigilance Commission, the Controller and Auditor General, the Central Bureau of Investigation, where accountability levels are very high. And round-the-clock assessments have been introduced. Government recently promulgated implementation of Rule 56J, wherein if you're above the age of 55 and have put in 30 years of service, you can be retired if your performance is not satisfactory with a summary order. So there have been there has been tremendous increase in accountability levels of government servants than it was ever before. And today, what accountability levels are definitely extraordinarily high.
Okay.
Of course,
Actually, next question,
I want to add.
this answer of yours, you answered well. The next question is, you talked about civil service recruitment, their robust training process, the way they are actually handling different situations in India, normal and post-pandemic situation. Now there is a query, National Recruitment Agency, NRA, what will be its role in the context of good governance of today and tomorrow? So will it add to the situation qualitatively, or what will be the actual role played by National Recruitment Agency in the context of good governance in India? Please.
The National Recruitment Agency is a new creation. It is yet to be formally established. It will be there for at the subordinate service level, that is for those who have passed class 10 to class 12 who are seeking employment. And currently it has been notified for 3 sectors: banking, posts, and railways, as an entry-level examination, because people have to appear for multiple examinations, and now they can appear for a single examination and results would be there for valid for 3 years. So it will bring definitely greater transparency into the system. It will also reduce multiplicity of examinations, reduce costs, not only for students, but also for government also in terms of conducting these examinations.
Okay, let's take one or two only, which we received in email. One question is very interesting. Is good governance an Indian concept or it is imported from some foreign land? What is the view of our honorable guest speaker today?
There is a paper of mine that deals with the Central Secretariat, the Indian Civil Service, and the Indian Political Service from 1834 to 1947. And it was a Foundation Day lecture at the National Archives of India that I had delivered in 2019, February 2019. Please access that paper and you would find how was the file system created. In fact, the file system was created by the British so that everything had to be documented. Every decision had to be documented in writing. And they also felt that the Indian civil servants did not have the capacity of British civil servants. So that, and we would have to write long number of note sheets so that the quality of drafting skills of Indian civil servants improved a great deal. So Lord Curzon mentions in his notes as to why he feels the need to ensure that a file system is introduced in this manner. Then as you go on and reading as to whether the British were happy. Today people say, oh, I've been sent to a desert state and I'm working in the Thar. It's a difficult posting. I hardly see a person for 100 kilometers. And then officers going to Northeast keep saying that, oh, we've landed up in a very far off land, you have to fly across Bangladesh. It is not easy. But then when you see, is it new to the current model? It's not so. You'll find that even British officers who were posted to India in some of the distant parts in 1900s still experienced a lot of difficulties. And but a lot has changed. A lot has changed. Good governance is not only today's concept. Everybody has tried good governance, and new models are brought up with each government. And what you would see today is a very digitally empowered model. And the fact that India could successfully transform itself from a debtor country, from a borrowing country from the IMF, to one of the fastest growing economies in the world represents the sheer quality and resilience of our governance model. And also as a democracy, as a meritocracy, we stand out. And a lot has to go with people like you, the public administrators of India, who have conceptualized better and better students for leadership.
Okay, thank you. Actually, the first question I got is actually the last question of today. It's very, very pertinent today. Someone writes, can there be a new phase or second phase of good governance after almost 3 decades of worldwide practices of good governance in the light of what happened in early 1990s in UN system, in the sub-Saharan African region, what they wrote, then in the context of Europe, the other activities in UN and other countries, in the developing countries, in underdeveloped societies. Taking all those things to account, the question says, can there be a new phase or second round of good governance in India and furthermore in the world? What is your view? Please illustrate.
Well, if you recall the first slide I showed, I did put in a quote that I got from Dr. Duvur Subbarao, whether contemporary challenges of 21st century are different from the challenges of 20th century. And his answer was, commitment to larger public good against all odds is what defines good governance. So let me re-emphasize that commitment to larger public good against all odds, or the other one, yoga karmastu kaushalam, achievement is efficiency in action, is what defines the basic model of good governance. So as I said, there has to be ethical governance, there has to be accountable governance, transparent governance, and accountable governance. In addition, it has to deliver results. That is good governance.
Now, I think we come to the close of this session. I would like to continue, but we got the indication that it's time to wind up. So now I request my co-panelist, my colleague, Dr. Babuji, to propose a formal vote of thanks for all of us, those who are here, those who have facilitated, and especially our VC, PVC, and honorable guest speaker and the participant. Dr. Babu, please.
Thank you very much, sir, once again. At the outset, I would like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Sambasiva Rao, for his constant support and motivation, especially to this academic discourses. Thank you very much, sir. In the same line, I also thank Professor Patnaik, our Pro-Vice Chancellor, for his support and encouragement. Then, the time to thank our speaker of the day. Sir, we are very much impressed with the word ethical, accountable, and I am the IAS. This is a motivating thing, sir, and you are a model to all of us. Thank you very much, sir, for that. Not only that, the deliberations over policies, actions, and nitty-gritties of their implementation, which is in the contemporary sense. Thank you very much for that again, sir. And let me note this, and thank you for one more thing, that you gave an altogether a separate session over this, answering to the questions that raised by the esteemed participants. Thank you very much, sir, for that again. Then let me thank my co-panelists and the man behind this webinar, without whom this webinar would not have been a reality. Thank you very much, sir. And he is an asset, academic asset in our department. We cherish him and we follow his footsteps. Thank you very much, sir. And with that, let me thank our cordial and a fantastic technical support, that is ICT, and especially Suraj, who has been with us almost all the ways. And